Welcome to Influencers, the art of dealing with them, but also the art of maybe becoming one as well. And we'll look at that a little bit later. I'm Dante and James. Let's get underway and learn more about the world of influencers and more specifically, influence marketing. Let's share that screen and go. A quote first from Mark Zuckerberg, probably the one of the greatest influencers of all time, simply because of the platforms that he's built and that he now owns, have given him the opportunity to influence a lot of people, not necessarily for himself, but to enable whatever his vision is for the future. People influence people. Nothing influences people more than a recommendation from a trusted friend. Today, what we're going to look at is what an influencer actually is and how influence marketing works. We'll look at how you can engage with influencers, whether they approach you or you approach them. We'll look at the things that influencers do and don't do, some pitfalls that I think the uninitiated sometimes will fall into. And we'll take a brief look as well at how you may go about becoming an influencer yourself. In fact, you might already be one. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program. It's an initiative of the Australian Government in conjunction with Business Station in Western Australia, Regional Development Australia, Brisbane in Queensland, and Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory, where I happen to be located. You can watch this later on through the Business Station and Dante St. James channels. I'll give you a piece of advice there, though. On the Business Station channel, lots of different stuff from lots of different people. So there's plenty of other advisors who do these free webinars just like I do. But if you just want to see my stuff, because maybe I'm an influencer to you, hey, just putting it out there, you can see my channel as well for all my daily content. A little bit about me before I get underway. I work with Clickstarter, which is my own digital agency and training company. I also work with the New Business Assistance with Niece program, particularly in Darwin and Alice Springs. I do a lot of work with Google's Digital Springboard program to bring digital literacy to people who don't usually have it. Treaty Business Consulting is where I contract to as a digital advisor and to help them with digital events. I also work with Facebook's Boost program. I'm taking off in a couple of weeks, in fact, to go and see a bunch of people on the central coast of New South Wales to show them how to use Canva and the Facebook family of apps to grow their small businesses. And then I've got my own training entity called just Dante St. James, my name, as I do a lot of personalized one-to-one coaching and strategic planning for people looking to move really confidently into the digital world. So you can't really look past the idea of the influencer without understanding what the impact of the influencer has been, particularly in Australian business. Shockingly so, 40% of Australians are more likely to buy from a brand that an influencer has posted about. This was a surprising statistic for me, gathered from the Influencer Marketing Hub. Now, immediately they've got a vested interest in this kind of number, but I look at it the same. I think, actually, how many times have I bought software or bought even a phone based upon what an influencer is? I bought my phone, my last phone, based on the reviews and influence of particular YouTubers who I watch reviews of. Did they influence my purchase? Absolutely. Did I have some smart impacts on, did I have any sort of other influences? Yes, it was other influences, such as looking at the specs, looking at the kind of things that these phones and devices do. But when it came down to the trust factor, I trusted particular people so much that I actually bought that product because they said it was worthwhile. The top categories of traveling of influencers in Australia are unsurprisingly travel. Now, even with the pandemic, the travel influencer is still number one. Why? Because we've still got internal domestic travel going on. So people are taking photos in amazing places all around the place. Like, I've got a lot of them going on in places like Kakadu, Uluru, Kings Canyon, Litchfield National Park, just in the Northern Territory. But we're seeing the same thing happen. And the beautiful rainforest, Daintree, Cape Tribulation, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, and especially some of the amazing sites you can see in Western Australia, like Wave Rock, Then we're going up to Broome and Cable Beach, some of the incredible vistas you'll see, the wildflowers of spring, which we're looking forward to coming up a little bit later this year. Travel, definitely number one, but it's not far ahead of lifestyle. So that's people like the lifestyle of being a mum, or the lifestyle of being a digital nomad, or the lifestyle of being a vegan, for instance. And then food, which is all about the preparation and discovery of amazing new foods. And food influencing is very alive and well in Australia, despite last year having so many restaurants down for the count. The platforms that, unsurprisingly, are the heaviest when it comes to their use of social media obviously has to be Instagram. Instagram is kind of where the influencer thing came from. So it's no surprise that it leads the pack there. But Facebook is also incredibly strong when it comes to influence. In fact, people who are over the age of 35 are much more easily influenced by people who are either thought leaders, celebrities, or friends and family who influence purchases for them on Facebook, particularly through groups or just chat one to one. TikTok is a really big place for influence for those who are under the age of 25. You find a lot of smaller consumer goods sold in large volumes are making their way to influencers across TikTok, and you'll start to see product placement in the same way that you do from television shows. You know, you can't watch MasterChef without understanding that it's indelibly tied to Coles, and there's certain certain cars that they drive in certain reality shows in Australia as well. So that kind of thing is starting to appear on TikTok. The other area which was surprising, I didn't realize it was quite so big, was the effect of influence on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn doesn't appear to be an influencer haven, but when you think about it, you follow a whole lot of people and their content on LinkedIn, you read into them. Even myself, I produce a lot of content on LinkedIn and have a lot of followers. So I think, oh, actually, I might be influencing other people. And I'm certainly being influenced by other people on there. Like AJ Calatunga, for instance, is a guy that I follow heavily. Adam Drake is someone else, Brene Brown. And I've been recently really getting into a woman called Sarah Denham, who's based in North Queensland as a writer. And I really enjoy her posts and really get a lot out of them. And Barbara Clifford, who's a fellow Territorian, who's called The Time Tamer. And I take a lot of her tips on board and read a lot about what she's proposing because it actually makes sense. This one really got me. I didn't realize it was quite this powerful. 70% of Aussies actually use social media as part of their research to buy new things. So they don't necessarily go and buy it just simply because they saw it on social media. It's like they're looking to buy something and actually going and using social media posting and presences on social media as a part of the credibility of buying a new product. So, for instance, if you're looking to buy a new, let's just say a new washing machine, that new washing machine, you would look for reviews on Google, you go to Product Hunt, places like that. But you're also now starting to go to places like social media. What social media will provide for you in terms of some credibility or peace of mind can be the way that that particular brand will interact with its buyers, with its customers, because customer service is a lot carried out on social media these days through Facebook Messenger, through tweets, through direct messages that are happening through Instagram. All those sort of channels are really important for a customer to feel that they can be a little bit more confident in moving forward with a large purchase, particularly. The same thing goes when they're buying personal services or professional personal development services. If you're going to hook up with a coach, then you probably need to do a bit of research on what they're doing on social media, particularly if they're putting themselves out there as a social media coach. That's a pretty important one. So, at the very beginning of it all, what can we honestly say an influencer is? Is it someone in a bikini that's under a waterfall in Bali? Is it someone who takes photos of every eggs Benedict that they have on a weekend? Or is it someone who maybe shows the interaction with their kids through life and proposes that they have a really great relationship with their kids? It can be all the above and a whole lot more. Let's really dive deep down into this because it's not a simple answer, even though we can pull out a couple of very simple answers here. It goes so much deeper. So the influencer has the power to affect the purchasing decisions of others because of his or her authority, knowledge, position, or a relationship with their audience. That's all about the ability to move the needle of things that aren't selling so well to get them selling a whole lot more. The influencer also has a following in often a distinct niche with whom they actively engage. That's an important definition there, that they don't just have a following in a niche, they actively engage with that following. The size of the following depends upon the size of their topic and the interest of that, or the size of the niche. Important again, that not always does the following equate to influence. Sometimes the following just simply is because they're in a particular area of interest, like travel or food or being a mum, that has lots and lots of interest in it. If you are posting as an influencer in the world of physics, your following will be much smaller because the general interest in physics is a lot less. It's a very niche kind of thing to get an audience for. So if we were to break down what kind of influencers there are out there, we'd be looking at things like numbers of followers, or we might categorize by the types of content or the platforms that they post on. Or even again, we may categorize an influencer by the level of influence they actually have on their audience. So let's first of all look at the follower numbers. And when we break this down, not everyone is going to be a Kardashian. They're what we call mega influencers. But then there's also the next rung down, which we call macro influencers, then micro influencers, and finally, at the very smallest end, the category of nano influencers. So what's a mega influencer? Kim Kardashian, obviously over 1 million followers. They could be very established movie stars, established sports stars like Cristiano Ronaldo, or Nadal or Roger Federer. They could be TV stars. They could be someone who stars in a TV show. So it could be Kris Jenner from Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It could be any one of the Married at First Sight evictees, although they don't tend to get to the over 1 million follower mark. They're not that influential. And they're kind of here today, gone tomorrow. Like people who come out of things like MasterChef and My Kitchen Rules, they don't tend to be in this mega category because they just don't have that heavy influence, and they're not really a global star. They tend to be just a real, very niche, very local star within Australia. This is where your YouTubers and TikTokers can get in there, but they're very much more about those super celebrities that had TV deals, movie deals. They're a bit beyond the Logan Pauls, although Logan and Jake Paul could probably sort of bordering over into that mega. They've certainly got over 1 million followers on YouTube, but they don't seem to have a great deal of influence when it comes to purchasing power. They're more about getting monetized and selling their own product. So it's a very different sort of it. They're more like your classic entertainer rather than an influencer who you can go into, because these kind of level of people, they're really only going to be available to big brands with very, very big budgets to spend. You're not going to be able to send a handmade clutch bag to Kim Kardashian and expect her to feature your wares on her social media following, for instance. You'd have to be maybe Chanel or Hermes or something like that, who's going to have a very large budget attached to it, because Kim doesn't do anything for free. Your macro influencer is the next level down. So Raka Raka, these are the two guys from Australia, the Philippou brothers. They do a lot of stunts. They tend to do a lot of like crazy, outrageous stuff to get attention. So they're like Jake and Logan Paul, I guess, but the smaller Australian version of that. Now, this kind of level of influencer has at least 40,000 people following them. And then after that, this sort of gets up to that 1 million mark. So there's a big jump from 40,000 to 1 million. But this is probably where most of the recognition of influencers is that we come from. When we think of influencers, we don't necessarily think of Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian or Roger Federer or Sally Fitzgerald. We think of then these kind of guys, the people who have a following of under 1 million, but are in a very sort of niche kind of area. They could be those B-grade celebrities. This is where your My Kitchen Rules and Married at First Sight and Australian Idol and Big Brother evictees tend to be in this sort of area. But they also where most of your YouTube stars sit. So a lot of your makeup influencers, who are not quite the huge mega ones like James Charles and the one that looks really freaky. I can never remember his name, but they're those big beauty influencers as well. It's not them. They tend to be over the million mark, but it's the next level down. So Jazz Hands out of the Gold Coast. She's really, really popular and fits into this category as well. It also has a few downsides to it at the macro level. These guys can tend to just feature anything for money. So they'll take anything that's thrown at them and feature it for money, whether it's protein powders, slimming tea, or it could be things like holiday destinations, anything that they can sort of swing into a way that they're going to look good with, they're going to look like a bit of a legend with, they're going to gladly endorse. This is also the area which is most likely to attract what we call fraudulent numbers. This is fake followers, buying followers from Bangladesh call centers, that kind of thing. This is where you're starting to get to a point where the numbers kind of don't feel very real. And you'll see very large gaps between the levels of following that they'll report and the levels of engagement, such as likes, shares, and comments. You're not going to see, a lot of matching up. So for instance, if they've got 50,000 followers but they've only got 2 or 3 comments, something's going wrong there. Those followers are either not very engaged or they're fake. If they've got, say, 40,000 followers but they're consistently getting hundreds of comments, and that's a bit better a proportion than 100,000 with no comments at all. So look into that before you engage with those macro influencers, and understand too that these are not particularly loyal or brand loyal people. These are people who are in it for their own ego most of the time. They're generally in it because they love being watched. So they're not people who are necessarily in it to grow your brand, unless it brings them lots of money. The micro influencer, I'm showing Francesca Moy here, who's a motivational influencer within Australia, lives out of Brisbane and has been sort of doing a lot of workshops around the country. Now, she may not have more than 1,000 followers at any point in time in her different social media followings, but she does have knowledge and expertise in certain areas. She's an everyday person who became an influencer, not because she set out to become one, but it kind of just came with the kind of work she does. They will often promote things for free that they believe in. And they find it very, very important that what they're promoting is a good match for their brand. These are not generally, funnily enough, how small they are, generally the people who will just hawk themselves for any old product. You can send them free stuff, doesn't mean they'll necessarily accept that they're going to match this. You can send them all sorts of stuff, such as offers to pay them to review your business or review your product, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually going to turn into them doing that thing. It all comes down to whether they are going to be feeling that it's a good match, feeling that it suits their own personal brand. Their reputation and their personal brand is very, very important to them. So they don't tend to just hop on any old bandwagon. And they tend to be, unlike the macro level, who tend to be very temperamental and tend to do a lot of things that are very risky or doing everything to get more and more followers. These micro influencers are not that concerned about the number of followers they've got. They're more concerned about the relationships they're building. So the micro influencer is a very, authentic and very almost a safer place to go. So they're very much into the idea that there's a good match, a good synergy. They're very, very big on synergies. There's also a new category that we call the Nano Influencer, where it's under 1,000 followers, very niche, very localized, generally someone who's followed fairly popularly in a particular area or a particular industry that's very local. They have very, very specific areas of interest. So it could be something in industrial mechanics. They could be people who are to do with business growth in a particular city or town, or they could be someone who is a politician, for instance, in a particular city or town. They will often promote things that suit them for free, but like the micro influencer, it's very important for them to make sure that what they promote is matching them. They don't often want money or take money for influence and for promoting things. It's usually based around the match, the synergy, the thing. And also what they really look heavily into is, will this bring value and will it be respecting my audience? Now, even if they've only got 500 people following them, I think I've only got 700 and something following me on Instagram, for instance. In that case, I would only take on a promotion that I think really suits my brand, is not going to look like I'm selling out to all my friends, and also still doesn't make me feel awkward about posting the stuff, where I'm not going to feel like I am somehow selling out and doing something I shouldn't be just because someone threw a bit of money or a bit of free product at me. I want to make sure that everything really sits in the right place for me and doesn't sort of doesn't compromise who I believe I am. Now, follower numbers are only one way of categorizing who an influencer is. The second major way of categorizing who an influencer is by the type of content they're doing and where they're posting that content. So we can look at several areas that are really quite heavy when it comes to the type of content. First of all, there's the bloggers. The bloggers post to things like their own websites, often to articles on LinkedIn, perhaps, to places like Medium. Then you've got the YouTubers who obviously operate on YouTube, but also operate on other video channels as well, like Facebook and Twitch and those areas. Then there's the podcasters who primarily are sending out an audio feature. They're doing everything in audio. And in that, they have very intimate connections with their listeners. And then finally is the one we probably know the most, which is the social media influencer. It's the one which sort of has the biggest numbers and the lowest amount of effort or entry point to get to be an influencer on social media. Probably the easiest one to operate in, although some influencers would say, no, it's not easy. I work really hard for my money. Mm-hmm. I sound like I'm really, really jaded with influencers. I'm not really. I've worked with a lot of influencers, and most of them have been an absolute delight to work with and have been very successful for the brands that I've been representing. Bloggers. Let's start with them. This is longer format written content. They may have some images and video, but it's generally about writing an article. This is where people produce themselves as a quite often as a what we would call a like a journalist or a writer of some description, where they fancy themselves as producing their own little version of a magazine, so that magazine is then set up for a very specific area of content. So that's either going to be about travel in a particular place, or it's going to be food, or it's going to be something like that, that they are very much known to be the trusted expert in that area. They are very open to things like sponsored posts. So for instance, if you were to sponsor a post and pay them to feature your particular food products in a recipe that they're doing, then they're very open to that. They're also usually quite open to guest blogging partnerships with other people who are in their niche. So if they're a chef and you're a chef, then there's really good opportunity to cross post and leverage each other's audience there. If you're, for instance, a mechanic and they're a mechanic as well, great. You've probably got the same opportunity there to be able to find some sort of synergy and a match that makes sense for both of you. The one key thing I'll say about bloggers, though, is that their following is very loyal and very engaged. It takes effort to go to a blog every day or every week or every month. And it's often not because it's prompted in social media, but because these people naturally go there, or they get that content notified to them via email. So the kind of person who will take 15 minutes out of their day to read an in-depth blog post is someone who is very interested in what you do. So these kind of followers are a great following to be able to work with. The YouTubers, these guys are a bit more temperamental. So the videos on YouTube tend to run about 10 minutes long, because that's the length of time it takes for the YouTube algorithm to turn them into what they call monetization. It's a long enough video to enable ads to play on YouTube. Now, I've got YouTube Premium, so I don't see any of the ads, but most people in the world don't pay for YouTube, which means that they're going to get ads at the beginning, at the end, and in the middle as well during certain points. 10 minutes is the length you need in order to insert ads into without becoming too intrusive to the content of the video. So you generally find that a lot of these, like the makeup influencers and that, they will waffle on and 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 on until they get to a point where it's just ridiculous and they're just stretching it out. Now, some of them will get to about 7 minutes, and what they'll add is just like a little bit of video or music at the end to fill out the rest of that 10 minutes so that they can actually still make that 10 minutes of monetization time. Now, most of these guys, they conduct themselves on YouTube, but there's other platforms such as Twitch, which is an Amazon-owned gaming sort of live stream network. It's more about live streaming though than produced videos. It could also be on Facebook. It can also be on Instagram Reels. TikTok could be like a YouTuber kind of area. Just bear in mind, though, that a lot of the YouTubers, in order to maintain some kind of level of engagement and excitement in what they're doing and interest in who they are as people, will tend to be drawn to a lot of drama and controversy. So be very aware that the person who you've had to do this amazing influencer marketing campaign of yours on YouTube today could next week be rolled up in a very offensive scandal over race, misogyny, homophobia, particularly things of either three big unholy trinity that YouTubers could get drawn to. So that makes them a very temperamental group, because these are people who are stars. They're essentially becoming stars in their own right, or they're wanting to be stars in their own right on a different channel. It might not be channel 7, 9, or 10. It'll be channel YouTube. And so they treat themselves as being potential celebrities. They get a couple of 100,000 views on a video, and that they think it gives them permission to act like a prima donna. So quite often you're going to get a lot of misbehavior in this group. This kind of influencer is all about the applause. They're far more about entertainment and the engagement numbers than they are about expressing any sort of expertise or credibility. Most beauty influencers know nothing about skin, know nothing about beauty, know nothing about trichology. They just simply have taught themselves how to apply makeup to get certain effects on the face. Often they've copied that off other beauty influencers and just taken their techniques on as their own. Podcasters, a bit of a different beast, far less temperamental than the YouTubers, and generally a bit older too. The podcaster has their episodes delivered to their audience via subscriptions. So this is a very loyal audience. I've got a list of about 32 different podcasts that I'll listen to each week. The same providers every week, because they're like clockwork. My listening becomes like clockwork. I don't often take on a new podcast. In fact, I probably haven't taken on listening to a new one maybe the last year, because I'm really satisfied with the ones I follow now. The influence I get from those people is adequate for me. The information I'm looking for is very specific, and those people deliver that information to me. And they're also quite entertaining, and I enjoy having a laugh with them, having a cry with them. And I agree with a lot of the things they'll say about different issues and topics. Podcasters tend to dive very deeply into a particular topic. So there could be a podcaster who is about conspiracy theories. There could be a podcaster about technology and the use of it. They could be a podcaster when it comes to life coaching or getting better at being an adult, basically. They are therefore very open to sponsorship, but generally where it fits. You won't see me doing an ad, for instance, for supplements. I don't believe in many supplements. I think they are basically snake oil. But if I was to get approached by very good software, and I say, for instance, a VPN piece of software like ExpressVPN or NordVPN, or there's another one with a shark on it somewhere. If I was to use these products, actually swap out from the product that I've got and honestly use it for about a month, that would be the only time I'd really look at going, I can recommend this product because I use it myself. That's generally the attitude of a podcaster. So I'm a podcaster, by the way. The attitude of the podcaster is, I'm not going to promote it unless I would use it. And they're very high in integrity, because the audio medium is a very intimate medium. Video can seem a bit unreal. It can seem a bit out of your world and in a strange sort of thing. Visuals kind of take away that connection that people have. But just like radio and talkback radio particularly, you feel like you develop an affinity and a rapport and a real relationship with the host of a radio show. Likewise with podcasting. Podcasters are also very open to interviews where that interview is relevant to what they're doing. For instance, I would be open to interviewing other digital marketers because I would be fascinated to present their points of views to my listenership. Now, my listenership is around about 1,000 a week, which is great. It's not setting the world on fire, but it's pretty good still. So that 1,000 people a week would expect a certain kind of content with me. If I was to suddenly start promoting the use of Internet Explorer as the best possible browser you can use, my listeners would look at that, listen to that and go, this doesn't sound like the voice of Dante. This sounds like the voice of someone else that's paying for this. And they'd be right. Business and news are very heavily represented when it comes to the the podcasting influence. But there's big general personalities as well. People like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's all about business growth and personal development. You've got Joe Rogan, who's got a lot of opinions. I don't even know why he should have opinions, but he's got a lot of opinions and a big following, maybe because he's that gruff American, all American male, no nonsense, kind of straight talking, straight shooting bloke. That might be what it is. Others can be people who report on particular news from particular industries. So they become very heavily regarded as trusted authorities and credible representatives of those industries. And finally, the social media influencer. This is the one we've all come to know and love, or know and hate, one of the two. Most influencers operate in this area on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest, those kind of areas. Now, these people can take on some very strange kind of products to partner with. For instance, someone who is perhaps a cooking influencer suddenly finding themselves in the middle of a clothing store and wanting to promote the clothes that they're wearing. It seems a little bit weird because they're not really known for being fashionistas. They're more known for being people who cook. So if someone's to come with them with amazing Damascus steel knives, that would make a little bit more sense. This particular influencer is very much about wanting to get paid for their audience. They're very strong and going, I built an audience, I have a relationship with my audience, I want to get paid. So they're not remarkably fussy about who they sell for, by and large. There are some, like for instance, I used to not really do work with, but I guess I was very around Bettina Banks, who was an influencer coming out of My Kitchen Rules. And she was very much about being around tying in food to what she was doing. She was known for her approach to food. She was known for being a cook. So therefore, she was wanting to make sure there was some sort of connection that was in there. She is probably the minority, though. Some of these influencers in social media are not particularly fussy about who they team up with. So you'll see them teaming up with all sorts of things like everything from WordPress websites, even though they're not a tech expert, through to things like I mentioned before, slimming tea was one of the horrible things that went around before, and a lot of protein powders and supplements. If you ever knew who Alex Jones has been, he's a very controversial and an absolute nutcase over in America who believes in every conspiracy theory there possibly could be. He is basically just a front for selling supplements, and he makes his money by his followers basically buying the supplements that he promotes all the time. And he uses his conspiracy theories to make people buy those supplements because they'll help them to get through the coming apocalypse or the zombie apocalypse or whatever conspiracy he is starting to work through now. So in this case, they're not that fussy, but you can find those who are. This is where the biggest audience tends to be. And they also happen to be where the smallest effort is to reach an audience. Those audiences, though, can be very, very fickle. 1 minute you're the belle of the ball. Next minute you're thrown out like Cinderella running home to get home before the coach turns into a pumpkin and the dress turns into cinders again. They are very much around that cancel culture and very easily outraged for good and for bad. So just bear in mind that social media, because this amplification effect that it does have, also has a strange effect on the influencers who operate on it. They can get a little bit temperamental. They can get a little bit controversial, particularly if they find that their influence is starting to fade a bit. They'll do increasingly more out there things. And that same goes for the YouTubers as well. They'll do more and more out there things to keep that engagement going, to keep people interested in them. So we also then don't just look at the numbers that are following. You don't just look at the type of platforms they're using, but we'll categorize our influencers in by the level of influence that they hold over their audience. So then we look at celebrities. They're probably obviously they're the original influencers, really, aren't they, for the whole product placement and brand endorsement thing. Then I look at thought leaders, who are one of the newer ones. So where someone will produce some content on a particular area of their expertise, and we look at them and going, they are a thought leader or an industry leader in this particular niche, and therefore I will listen to them and maybe even buy their products that they are promoting. And then there's what we call the disproportionate level of influence, where they have a small following but have an unusually high impact upon that small following. The celebrity, this I'm showing Lisa Wilkinson here, formerly of the Today Show, now on the Sunday Project show, but also very, very heavily on the speaker circuit. And that's a very strong point about celebrities too. They can be very expensive to get hold of and quite elusive. They're very picky about the kinds of things they're going to partner with, and they don't really like to partner with product. They prefer to partner with events. So to speak at an event, to be to tell funny stories, to go and be in a position where they get to tell their stories and be influential through inspiration. So in Lisa's case, she very recently spoke at an event here in Darwin where she was speaking to a number of women, and it was a very well-received event and people really, really liked her. She does represent a very strong effect on women who are breaking through glass ceilings, learning to work with very aggressive male personalities, and she does a great job of that. She's just quite an amazing speaker and very heart-centered as well. Then you have other people who might be like Peter Rosethorn, who you might have known as being Brett from Kath and Kim. Now, Brett, or I keep calling him Bretty, but Peter Rosethorn, for instance, has been in a few shows here and there. I think he was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here at one point. Might have been on Dancing with the Stars, but I'm not entirely sure of that. He's recently picked up some work in the is it the Rocky Horror Picture Show, something like that? Something where he's actually putting on a dress anyway in Perth, doing a show over there. Now, Peter Rosethorn originally came from, I guess, the fast forward, full frontal comedy kind of stuff, and back as far as maybe the Comedy Company as well. That sort of stuff is where he came from. And he speaks a lot in terms of the interesting stories of the people that he met, the characters he played, and the other characters he played alongside of. Though the experience of working alongside of, for instance, Magda Javansky, Jane Turner, and Gina Riley in Kath and Kim, and how that was so many funny things happened that never made it to camera that he would tell those stories about. They prefer to speak at an event to be inspirational, but also to be retrospective, to take you back into a time when you remember them and you like to have a smile and a laugh with them. The problem, though, with celebrities is that their influence is gradually declining. It's getting less and less and less. Millennials and Generation Z particularly don't really see that much in celebrities. They don't really worship celebrities in the same way. Some music performers they may have a bit of an inclination towards, but they're more likely to find their celebrities in things like YouTube, in Twitch, in Snapchat, in TikTok, than they will find celebrities on television or radio, or even the movies for that matter. It can be very hard, though, to find a celebrity to match your particular target. So, what your outcomes are, depending on what those might be, it can be really difficult to find a celebrity that does actually match exactly what you're looking for. So, you can find, say, for instance, Lisa Wilkinson is a great advocate for women's rights and for women in male dominated workforces. She's great for that, good match for that. If you're looking for someone who is to speak on the importance of science in the workplace and in STEM topics in school, that can be a very hard person to find. You'd naturally lean towards people like Dr. Carl from the ABC, and he does a lot of radio work as well. So he's very much that sort of person, but there's not that many others. So you've had trouble finding people who fit into that particular niche, who would be, say, a celebrity level of endorsement for that particular area. Then you've got the thought leader. Now, the thought leader is a relatively new invention that came a lot from LinkedIn. It came a lot from a lot of inspirational style videos on YouTube, less on YouTube, but though more on Facebook as being the distribution channel for that sort of thing. So you got people like Simon Sinek. Now, I don't know what he's the guy who's pictured. I don't know what he's famous for. I don't know why he has so much authority and is so highly regarded. I have no idea what his background is. I just find him really smug and I find him just really boring. And I think that is because I probably look for more obvious credentials from speakers than what I find from him. I just find he just speaks on topics that are very simplistic, and he speaks in kind of like Yoda style riddles that sort of twist words around so you can get a good quote. You can put a quote up on the screen and say, oh, this is a piece of wisdom from this famous person. You tend to find your thought leaders in the realm of advisors, academics, journalists, industry leaders, people who come from particular niches, and then are known as the experts or the high performers in that particular area. They tend to be people that are quite charismatic and can present themselves very, very well in front of a camera and have very cool, smooth, calm, but not boring speaking voices. They've got a lot of movement and flow in their voices, but they tend to be quite they're almost seductive in the way that they can hear. They've got lovely voices, and they tend to be very heavily geared towards British accents as well. So looking at people like Jay Shetty, who's got a very strong British Indian accent, who was once I think a Tibetan monk at some point. So he's got a beautiful, beautiful accent. Or I look at an influencer, say, who's a thought leader such as Aaron, who Arun, who's on a channel on YouTube called Mr. Who's the Boss, and he does a lot of looking at technology, particularly at mobile phones. So he's a very heavy industry thought leader in that area, and again has that smooth as silk chocolate voice that you just think this is like, whew, even gets me a little hot on the collar there. They are very, very highly regarded in their niches, these people. These are not just your average person who doesn't know anything about what they're talking about. They are considered to be experts in their area. And they can be very useful for B2B marketing. If you can attach a particular kind of product or service that you do to this kind of influencer, you're on a really, really strong, solid path, because these are very picky people. They're often selling their own product and service anyway, so they're not really that open. But if you do find one that's willing to do that, you'll probably find that you'll get a whole lot of credibility comes along with your product or service because of them being involved. If Simon Sinek was to turn up to your conference, that's a really big draw card. If Gary Vaynerchuk was to turn up to your conference, that'd be a massive draw card. Excuse me, it's very smoky here today, so I'm just getting like lots of histamine responses at the moment. So please excuse me if I have to stop and have a drink of water or a drink of coffee at some point to sort of clear it all out. They're the kind of people who, for instance, are very geared towards speaking, not so much against endorsement, although they may be showing some sort of, if they're particularly on Instagram, not Instagram, on Facebook or YouTube, they may have sponsorship involved in the beginnings of their videos. And a lot of that services, again, like we found with the macro influencer, and most of them are in this macro influencer level, that they want to work with things that they would use themselves so they can confidently and without hesitation be able to recommend them. And then we have what is the disproportionate following, and the kind of people who I guess we don't know quite why they're as influential as they are, considering they haven't really done much. This picture is a woman called Sally Illingworth, who is a failed pizza shop owner in Darwin, who's gone on to become a disproportionately influential person on LinkedIn. Now, does that mean I don't like her and don't respect her? Absolutely not. I thoroughly respect her. I think she's been able to come back from a failed pizza shop and do some amazing things. She's getting in front of thought leaders in the world of cybersecurity, in the world of high level IT management, even though she's done none of those things herself. She's done no cybersecurity work. She's done no high level IT or organizational planning or anything like that. Yet she's been able to be part of that conversation. She's grown a really solid following, and that following really does like her. Now, has she done some things that I think were very controversial to get herself to that point? Probably. I think there is a lot of using of her looks to get that influence and then complaining when people then called her on it. I think that's something you've got to be very careful of. But I still utterly respect Sally for being able to be able to go from a point where she wasn't really any influence in an area to be actually very highly regarded as a speaker, a facilitator, and particularly as a moderator and interviewer with people who are giants in their particular field. These people, like Sally, have come up from absolutely nowhere to build not only a following, but also to build up an ability to be able to speak authoritatively and with credibility into an area where they didn't actually really come from. So you want to engage with some influencers, you want to actually get on the influencer bandwagon and get them to promote your product. Well, there's a few things you probably need to know. So for instance, if an influencer approaches you, quite often they'll send you a social media message saying, hi, I'm an influencer in this niche and this is how I work. I would like to work with you. I've also approached your competitors. I'm looking for people in this area. Here's my rates. Here's my deal. Let's talk. Now, If someone does approach you like this, it's very important for you to go and do your own research. They're not going to come with all that research in a portfolio. Quite often, they don't come with anything else but a message to indicate that you would be mad not to use them in some way, shape, or form. So do your research. Look for whether they are if their target is also your target. So, for instance, the people following them, are these the people who are most likely to want to deal with your business, to buy your product, or to work with your services? If you're in a position where you're influencing a whole bunch of people that are not even in the country that you sell with, that's something you may need to look at and go, not really the target I'm looking for, because you'll just be paying money or giving away free product for absolutely no reason at all. It's not a bad thing to ask for references from previous clients as well. That way you can ensure that you've got some sort of backup to go back on when you say, well, how do I know that this thing's going to work? How do I know if this influencer has any sort of carriage or credibility when it comes to delivering their particular product, their influential service to people for other clients? So there's ask for those references, and the good influencers and the ones who are used to that will provide those. Look through and see if they have lots of followers, but then don't have a lot of engagement. So, for instance, they may have 60,000 people following them, but the problem is that nobody's commenting, nobody's sharing, nobody's liking, no one's doing anything with those posts. That's a very big red flag. And you want to look through the posts for the red flags, but you also want to look through the following for red flags. Um, it's not more than once that I've been approached by a brand who wanted to work with an influencer, and then I've had to go and say, I cannot recommend that you work with this influencer because I believe that over 50% of their followers are fake. And I believe that they have also had a lot of fake engagement that they're paying for as well. There's a general pattern that comes with things like fake following. Fake following, they tend to be all in the same country. They tend to be, following in big clumps. They might have all appeared at one time. They've very suddenly gone from 20,000 followers to 50,000 followers in a month. And that's usually a sign that maybe that following was bought and that there's not real, their fake followers, not real. Then looking at sort of the comments that are fake, things that are coming up, such as, for instance, great post, bro, or cool post, I love your site. There's sort of the language that's very, very easily copy and pastable from one post to the next. And you see that kind of comment coming up a lot, again and again and again. That's showing you that their following is not particularly engaged with them, and those who are engaged with them are not necessarily real as well. Likewise, if you want to figure out who to approach, you look at all those same things. Do your research. Look for if they've got lots of followers and no comments. Ask for preferences from them if you're looking to approach them. Approach them and say, yeah, I'm looking to do this, but I need to know who you've done some work with before. Understand that their following is also your target. So if you're targeting youth between the age of 16 and 25, and this person tends to have a following that's very much for over 55-year-old women, then you're probably going to the wrong person. Make sure the people following, you can just go through, you can click on their followers, and you can go through and see the photos of all those followers and to see whether you're noticing patterns of lots of older people, lots of men, lots of women, lots of people who are from different countries that you don't target or you don't service. You'll see all that sort of information starting to show up. And then also, always check through to see some red flags, to see if this person's posted something in the past that was misogynistic, racist, homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, any sort of phobias, any sort of things which you don't agree with. It's very important if you want to team up with an influencer, you're kind of on the same page as them. If you're a bit more conservative leaning, you'll want them to be a bit more conservative leaning. If you're a lot more liberal and left wing, you want them to be liberal and left wing as well. You want someone, if you're LGBTIQA plus, you would want then that person to either be part of that community or an ally. So make sure you do look for those red flags before you approach anyone. Make sure you're approaching the right people. So a couple of do's and don'ts when it comes to dealing with an influencer. I can tell you now that most of them come down to creative differences. When you're looking at the creative side of dealing with an influencer, you need to understand that they control the creative, you don't. They are doing the performance, they are doing the review, they're doing the talk, they're doing the placement, not you. Now, whilst you control the core outcome, which is to say, I want to make sure that my product is properly represented and positively represented before you're going to pay them for that sort of thing. You can control that, because if they don't want to do that and don't want to place that through until, you wouldn't want them to put that post out until you've seen it, to make sure you're happy with it and it's presented in such a way that makes sense for you to promote a product, right? Because it's essentially, even though it's not an ad, you're not buying an ad, it has some kind of expectation that at least you have some kind of say over what's going to be put out there about your brand and about your product, especially if you're paying for it. But you've got to understand that you're not buying an ad, you're not directing an ad, you're not writing a script, you're not directing the photography. This is all their job. And they are going to do it their way. They're going to do it the way that appeals to their audience. Now, you have no idea how to communicate with their audience, which is why you're going to them. They have all sorts of ideas on how to communicate with their audience. They know, because they've got the relationship with that audience. They've got the rapport. They've got the following from that audience. You don't. You're the outsider. So it's like going to advertise during MasterChef on Channel 10 and thinking that somehow you should have some editorial control over what happens on that show. You're just advertising during the show. You don't have nothing to do with the show. You don't have any kind of editorial creative control over what happens on that show. Likewise, you're not going to have that control over influencer marketing. So you're kind of like an ad in the middle of what they normally do. You don't have control over that creative. It's not yours to control. Also know that you're not going to get exclusivity generally. And know that the effect of influencer marketing fades very, very quickly. The general thought about social media is that it's a medium which passes by very fast. So the novelty effect of something new and something very, very influential on social media lasts a day and it's gone. So understand that a campaign with an influencer has to be more than just posting one per day, unless they've got millions of followers, and then that could actually translate to something. But if your influencer only has, for instance, 1,000 followers, and you are involved in one post, the problem with that is that it's not going to reach anybody. Not that whole 1,000 people are going to see it, and it's just not going to get in any sort of person's state of mind. It's not going to get to their eyes. It's not going to get to their heart. It's not going to have any actual influence on them. So you've got to make sure that you have a plan to work with that influencer that goes beyond just one single post. And don't need to go over a series of posts over a few weeks or months in order to get that kind of effect you're looking for. Understand too that influencers will approach your competitors. They generally go and approach businesses in similar areas or similar niches. So if they're looking for coffee to partner with, they'll approach 30 different coffee providers. They may or may not tell you they're doing that. Quite often they do tell you they're doing it, so they can make you feel like, oh, I better get this now because this is an opportunity I might lose because my competitors will get it. They'll often do that. Though some will not necessarily run your competitors really close to you and do an ad for your coffee one week and do an ad for another coffee next week. Some of them will actually offer exclusivity in a particular niche for a specific period of time. They say for the next 6 months, we'll approach no other coffee places or take on any other coffee endorsements. Or we will not take on any other hotel chains because we're exclusive to you for the next 12 months. And here's why. So you'll have to pay extra for that, obviously, because you're taking away the opportunity for them to grow their revenue using your competitors. So if you want exclusivity, if it's offered, it will be a lot more than what their general rate card would indicate. So in amongst all this, you've sort of said the idea that, well, why don't I become an influencer myself? And that's a very good point. In fact, you may already be an influencer. I know that I'm an influencer at a micro level because I've got a following of several thousand people who come to me for advice. They come to me for what products to use and how to engage with digital channels, or things like how to engage with influencers, because I've been engaged a number of them with campaigns with clients before. So looking at becoming an influencer, look at the idea of choosing a niche to get involved in. That's a really important one, because you want to make sure that you know what you're talking about. I don't go into a webinar until I know that subject thoroughly and I've had something to do with it. I can't go into a webinar where I go, I don't know anything about this. I'm just going to do some Googling and find out a bit about it. because then you could go and do that yourself. The only reason you would attend one of my webinars as an influencer, as someone who's got some expertise in that area, is that I've chosen a niche in digital marketing that I'm very, very experienced at, and I'm very, very knowledgeable about. I study on this every day. I do learning every month. I get assessed for things every 3 months. I'm doing tons and tons um, of um, of consultations with clients right across Australia. So I've got the credibility for that. I chose my niche very carefully because I don't want to become an influencer in beekeeping because I don't know anything about it. The other thing is to develop a personality. Sometimes we're just boring. I'm pretty boring. I don't have a lot of personality, although I'm quite self-effacing, and I use some levels of comedy and a little bit of irony and a little bit laconic kind of approach to build a rapport with people who will follow my content. What's your personality? Are you the straight-faced person? Are you the bubbly, energetic person? Are you the fit, good-looking person? Or are you maybe the average everyday person who, the boy or girl next door that people just seem to like? What is the person? Are you the, hey guys, let's all come together, this is another exciting episode of? Are you the yelling, screaming type like that? Or are you just the person that everyone wants to be, or everyone wants to be with? Whatever that personality is, choose it carefully, because changing it halfway through is fraught with a lot of errors. I think of people like Iggy Azalea, who's an Australian. She became an Australian rapping R&B star over in America, got quite a big following with that, but it was then discovered by a lot of Americans that she's actually an Aussie from Mullumbimby in New South Wales. And let's just say that her backstreet, in the hood, hoochie mama ways that she developed is not who she actually was. She was just a country kid from Mullumbimby who actually got her start in pop music, and then suddenly pivoted towards being this like hard rapping, hard swearing, aggressive, alpha female rapper thing that she actually wasn't there. She wasn't her personality. She's not real. That's not really who she is. And it's been shown when she's been a judge on things like The Voice that that's definitely not who she is. So when you develop a personality, pick it carefully, make it as close to your own personality as possible. Otherwise, you're just going to be caught and tripped up along the way. See what others do. Look at the other people who are in that niche of yours. Look at the most popular people who are doing what you want to do, and replicate some of the things that they do. But for goodness sake, above all other things, be consistent. I do these webinars every day of the week, and I have to be very consistent every week that these are coming on. But if I step away for 5 weeks and then come back, I've lost all my following. They've now forgotten about me. I've completely transited out of their lives. I'm no longer relevant. So being consistent, like everything to do with social media and marketing, be consistent, and be consistent at being consistent as well. So what's next? You can talk to me about influence marketing. You can talk to Kasia McNaught in Perth about influence marketing. Sarah Thompson is very good with this sort of thing as well in Perth. In Queensland, you can talk to people like Tracy Sheen, Michelle Fragar, who's one of the better, accredited Australian Marketing Institute marketing professionals. I couldn't spit that out, could I? My words were just tumbling out. It's all right. We've got tons of professionals who are really good at this as part of the ASBAS Digital Solutions program. Your first console, if you've never had one before, is nothing. You don't pay anything. Zero, zilch, nada. If you've had one before, your second is $44, your third at $66, and these prices are GST inclusive. You can see that through businessstation.com.au, or partner with any one of these particular local ones: Business Station in Western Australia, Regional Development Australia, Brisbane in Queensland, and Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory. You can find out more at asbas.com.au. That's where you go and do that register and get that going. asbas.com.au, or reach out to me. I'll help guide you through it at dante@treaty.com.au. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. I don't mind being harassed there as long as you're very polite about it. I might not be a macro or a mega influencer, but I've got my following too, and you can have yours too. If you want to talk more about how I got there, I'd love to chat.